past couple of months have been an interesting time for Chainsaw Man. Not only has its bloom into popularity started to become more noticeable within communities, but its progressive, chaotic nature has also increased rather drastically. I've been reading Chainsaw Man since chapter 1, and witnessing its incline into absurdity has been a rather unexpected but beautiful thing. Because of this specific incline, I find it rather interesting how much it truly pushes against the boundaries of Weekly Shonen Jump, whether they're being lenient with certain series or are genuinely reeling back those said boundaries to allow more creative freedom if needed. These posted guidelines are nothing out of the ordinary, as it's of the company's best interest to publish to a specific age demographic. Because of this, the guidelines are automatically set in place for what you can and cannot show within that age bracket, from severe violence, sexual references, to pretty much anything relating to overly mature, with exceptions. This creates a pseudo-genre relating to Jump series specifically, which you've most likely experienced or witnessed within the community, as it's built and fueled from there. This is also backed by the monolithic global success of a variety of different series that have spanned over a large amount of years. Series like One Piece, Dragon Ball, Naruto, and Bleach. They all sit comfortably within the boundaries at different points, so of course with their incredible success, you'd want to try to replicate that within those same goalposts. However, it's not as easy, as over the years since the release of those series a lot has changed. The wants and needs from that guideline has started to become a lot more restrictive for newer series, with selective editors trying to sway darker elements or narrative ideas in favor for something more familiar within those original boundaries. My Hero Academia is probably a great example of a series that's based around the old structure of Jump's quote-unquote architecture of success and has slowly progressed into darker narrative decisions for an extremely powerful and successful payoff. On the business side of things, this can't be ignored. Seeing the incredible reception and success for these dark elements being utilized in a way that Jump probably wouldn't necessarily push for, it opens up the avenue to slowly reevaluate those limitations and guidelines bit by bit, with the overall hope that newer series that stand out within Jump's pre-existing structure, like Act Age and Chainsaw Man, are successful and flourish within their own utilization of grittier elements in comparison to other series. From someone on the outside looking in, it makes me excited to see Jump potentially open up the goalposts a little more to allow for more progressive writing surrounding serious, gritty, or over-the-top issues, allowing them to take a more centered spotlight instead of being danced around within the background to make people or companies happy. Obviously, there is still a line that can't be crossed, some more obvious than others. Perspective for that line goes into how each individual series would be handled from the beginning, how it would be marketed and approached from many different people. So when I say that Chainsaw Man is viciously pushing through the boundaries of Weekly Shonen Jump structure and it's highly praised and successful, it too is also something that can't be ignored. So when I see it get more promotion and acknowledgement and it's thriving, it makes me happy for it. Seeing it flourish within Weekly Shonen Jump's massive audience while pushing against those guidelines rather roughly, being rather free with how it wants to tell its story. Obviously, we don't know how everything works and functions to a certain degree, but I'm undoubtedly happy to see series like Chainsaw Man and Act Age thrive within such an iconic pre-established magazine. I am, however, still extremely curious on how Chainsaw Man didn't get recommended to be published in something like Weekly Young Jump, its seinen equivalent. So I thought I'd go through the series and look at some of its darker concepts and themes, how it utilized them and how it all comes together to break the successful structure and laws of Weekly Shonen Jump, and how it potentially opens up the reception for newer series to write with less restriction. So, with the lengthy opening out of the way, let's have a look at Chainsaw Man, with how chaotic and absurd it truly is. Chainsaw Man is probably best described as a series that doesn't take itself too seriously, with setting an example. Instead, it has this overlooking chaos that's both controlled and uncontrolled, as it flips in and out between those 2 points. But it's not to say that it breaks the story, or that you shouldn't take its narrative or characters seriously. If anything, it creates this proxy focus as you're drawn into its unpredictable, chaotic nature. The further you get into the story, the more it escalates, the more value and weight comes into every decision, and different utilization of gritty elements start to flow in. Usually it's stuff that will either shock or surprise you. especially if you're used to and comfortable within Weekly Shonen Jump's normal structure. Chainsaw Man feels different from the beginning, almost like it's out of place or meant to be elsewhere, especially given the simplistic name it has, which personally I feel it works in its favor, as you see the title and don't necessarily expect something like the story it actually gives, one filled with gruesome, over-the-top action but backed with extremely serious motives and ideals, ones that are fueled by real and powerful emotions. It's balanced with silly and quirky characters mixed with strong and manipulative ones, people like Denji and Power alongside Makima and Aki. The reason I mention these characters is because it's the first thing you come to recognize that contrasts drastically from one another. It helps build the overall tone and atmosphere for the early narrative and gives you an indication on what to expect. Take the first chapter, for example, and the picture it paints for not only Denji as a main character, but also the different tones it introduces. The entirety of it, up till the end, is heavily melancholic. It's brutal, personal, and it feels authentic. It's filled to the brim with an almost suffocating weight of emotion that surrounds itself around Denji and the life he is living. A life that has no meaning. A life that drags on as he struggles to get by and consequently gets used by different powerful people. But even though Denji is at his lowest point, with selling multiple body parts, being used and abused by different people and struggling to even eat, his outlook on life is rather simple. It's faintly hopeful, tinted with a shade of sadness, as his desires and wants are so minimalistic, like eating bread with jam or falling asleep within the arms of a woman. These things are escalated beautifully because of his relationship with his best friend, a small chainsaw devil called Pochita. Pochita would be a beacon of hope and happiness for Denji, allowing him to relinquish all of his desires in a natural and progressive way, instead of keeping it bottled up. But even by the end of the chapter, that beacon is ripped away from him, and instead embedded inside of him. As Denji and Pochita both get viciously killed and chopped up, Pochita sacrifices himself to merge with Denji, to allow him to live and to continue showing Pochita his hopes and desires. At this point, we get the first look at how over the top and gruesome Chainsaw Man's fighting truly is. It's heavily chaotic, it's bloody and vicious. It's something that's definitely unexpected within Weekly Shonen Jump and probably catches you by surprise with how wild and free it is. This is only the first chapter, but it sets a fertile foundation for the rest of the story to grow from, and it undoubtedly grows in some rather interesting ways. Not only does it continue to one-up itself and skyrocket into absurdity almost 80 chapters later, it genuinely plays on things that I'm still surprised are even allowed to be showcased in such a way. Take the Gun Devil, for example, an inherently powerful being that's born from the fear of guns. Its introduction alone is sat on top of appearing for only 5 minutes and destroying 1.2 million people around the globe and then vanishing. Now that's a pretty wild thing to put rather early into your story, but you're rather desensitized to it because of what Chainsaw Man embodies and what it showcased from the start. On the contrary, it may still surprise you, but you actually kind of expect something that absurd to happen. However, you probably wouldn't expect it to go into the finer details of something that hideous, but it does, rather openly and casually. The recent events within the manga somewhat kickstarted the idea behind this video. It showcases those finer details and even goes to list an abundance of casualty names, to the point where I don't want to talk about the specifics of the event, just because of YouTube and the guidelines. But just know it's rather full on, and if you've read it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. With the first chapter, and looking at its atmosphere and what tone it starts to lay out, to the highest peak of insanity throughout the story, skewered all between there is normal chaos, from crude, inappropriate, over the top, gritty, humorous, all the way to the question why. Why is that in there? And you'll probably find yourself asking that question quite a bit. This is Chainsaw Man's story, its world, its atmosphere, and design. This is how it's handled and even approached, and it definitely won't be for everyone. Everything that I've talked about may even sound rather off-putting, but I can promise you it's an extremely enjoyable experience. It's unique and refreshing. It has an impressive cast of engaging characters and contrasting emotions to tether everything together nicely. Still, I am shocked that a series like this is published so casually within Weekly Shonen Jump. Hopefully you can probably see a portion of why now, but it's great to see it thriving and being well received. And if it slowly opens up the door for Jump to allow more series of similar severity to come in, the creative flexibility for those said series could be incredible and make for some more unique and powerful experiences to reach a massive audience. The future for not only Chainsaw Man but ActAge is looking beautifully bright, and I couldn't be more happier for them. It is extremely well deserved. To bring this video to a conclusion, I'd like to say that Weekly Shonen Jump's magazine has a strong and successful lineup of series currently being pushed. It's always great to see diversity and uniqueness between them, even with how older series are spinning up some of their darker arcs currently. I don't think this will inherently change Jump, or even how they handle their pseudo guidelines or restrictions. It's based on continued profitability and global success for many years. But the idea that they could slowly be loosening those boundaries, thanks to specific success from certain series pushing those gritty arcs, concepts, and ideas forward, sounds like a great thing, and opens up the possibilities for future authors and series to flourish on different fronts. With that being said, let me know how you feel about Chainsaw Man and where it sits within Jump's structure currently. Do you enjoy how over the top and absurd it is? Also, are you enjoying some of Jump's bigger stars like My Hero Academia, with how they channel and showcase their more mature and grizzled themes, as the payoff recently has been rather phenomenal? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. So, I want to thank you all for watching, hope you enjoyed, drink plenty of water, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.